Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for watching this episode of my podcast. I have something very special to talk about today. I've been talking to an American painter, Bianca Valencia Criscuolo, and that's a fascinating journey and a fascinating dialogue. We talk about her work, we talk about theology, we talk about the philosophy of art. It's a wonderful mix. And basically, it's her attempt to try to understand at what level a philosophy of art would be able to discover the hidden meaning or the uh, ultimate expression of her work. It's my attempt to try and read an artist as if she, in this case, was a philosopher, someone who discovers things, who meditates on reality. And it has been quite fascinating so far. And I want to try to make a little recording. I wrote several blogs about her already, but I wanted to take it one step further. There are very special things going on in her work. Let me just give you one simple example of what I'm talking about. So this is the first image, the first picture, the first painting that I ever talked to her about. And there's something fascinating going on. Of course, the work has a title, Elohim, that's the name of God in the Old Testament, inevitable redemption, the redemption that you can't escape. Of course, the normal description of the work, the date, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Then an autobiographical note. This piece was painted after a period of 4 years of not painting. So from 2016 to 2020, she didn't paint, and this is then the moment that she started again, and she has been working till the present day. And then secondly, there is the poem, which maybe by mistake, maybe on purpose, has a title that is spelled wrong, Requiem. She left it at that. People notified her that it was a mistake, but there is something interesting going on in these so-called spelling errors. Sometimes they look Freudian, but they show let's say, the kind of randomness, the kind of sloppiness that you can also have in a painting, I mean. And you can have a stroke of the brush, which is not exactly as you have intended it, but this is how it comes out. This is what happens on the canvas, and you accept that. You accept this randomness of some of your movements. And you might say that these spelling errors are like the randomness in writing. Not writing with a spelling checker, not making everything very precise and neat, but writing like a painter would. I like that idea in itself. So there's a whole poem here, and then the question, of course, is what is the relationship between the title that seems to express some of the intention of the painter, then this little autobiographical note, then the economic note here, it's sold, it says, the painting itself, and then, of course, the poem. So many elements here brought together around the painting, which gives us the opportunity to give a specific interpretation of the work. Now, I argued in one of my blogs about Bianca that actually that conforms very well with some of the remarks that Emmanuel Levinas, the French philosopher, made about his notion of art. Very interesting that art is coming up from the raw being that it then tries to transform. And secondly, that ultimately art is an invitation to a conversation, to a dialogue, because the work of art should refer to an encounter with the artist, with reality, between the spectator and the artist, between the spectator and reality. But there is always an element of language, which of course is the primary means of communication. There's always a relationship with language. There is symbolic language. There is a specific pictorial language going on in her paintings. But there is certainly also the language of the poetry. Now, I didn't want to talk about this painting today, because I wrote about that painting already on my blog site, but I wanted to talk about some other work that I found. So let's go and look at that. This is the painting that I talked about with Bianca, talked to Bianca about with last Wednesday, I think, Tuesday, I must say, because this painting somehow struck a nerve with me. It's one of the few paintings where you can see that there is a real pictorial representation, in this case of a male body, I suppose. There's no autobiographical note, but we had a conversation about the circumstances of this painting, and there is the poem. Well, let me first tell you what my first impression was of this painting. What you see, of course, is a naked male figure. You see him crouching down, almost on his knees. And you see him within a circular shape here, almost as if he is captivated, prisoner of sort of sphere. Then you see something that is very common in her pictorial language, that's shapes like this, almost three-dimensional, representing, I think, a particular kind of movement that she likes to make also while painting. There's simply also the joy of painting involved, making certain movements that feel good. And I talked to her also about music, because she prefers to paint with music in the background. The music, of course, suggests rhythm and certain motions. So it could be that this is the result of the music she was hearing. In green, three-dimensional, nicely curved figures. Seems just like an illustration, but it's not. It's like a dream background of the whole picture, of the whole image. It suggests in this case a certain rest movement, surely, but it's a quite peaceful movement. And then there are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 rays of light coming down. And then in the bottom right corner, there's something that's suggested to be like an abyss, something where everything goes down to and then disappears, although the rest of the shapes don't really move toward that that little spot here. All of that suggested to me, just by looking at the image, that there's something bad going on. This is someone who has turned his back and is imprisoned by this sphere, but he has turned his back to the rays of light that are coming down. In the pictorial language of Bianca, obviously these light coming from above, these rays of light coming from above, something to do with the divine light In the painting Elohim, there are 7 rays of light, suggesting the 7 days of the week. Here there are just 5. There might be all sorts of associations with the number 5 or with these 5 rays where 2 are missing. Shabbat and Sunday are missing, maybe something like that. But at least the image itself doesn't show that. That is an association that you might have in the conversation about the image, that according to Levinas is actually the essence of every painting. It suggests to me kind of arrogance that breaks down. And the arrogance of turning your back to the light, turning your back to the divine light, coming out in this very awkward position. If you take a look at how the legs here are painted, the head is down. It suggests something like arrogant despair. Someone who is moving away from God, maybe, moving away from the divine light. Suggests the text from the Gospel of John. People don't come to the light because they want to have their works, the works of darkness, becoming clear, to come into the light. That's a painful experience if the depth of your conscience is now revealed. So I have a very negative feeling about this. When you take a look at the title, you see that the subtitle of the whole work is A Soul Broken. Yeah, that's what I see. A broken soul, but the brokenness has something to do with arrogance and with the attempt to avoid God, so to speak, to turn your back to God, so to speak. Then the poem adds a layer of meaning to the image. I fear most my humanity. So maybe this picture is not any man, any particular man, but it's man himself. It's the man, it's Adam. And Adam represents our common humanity. And the poem says, I fear most my humanity. So what is so dangerous or fearful about the figure of, let's say, Adam here? Well, the fact that he is able to turn his back to the light. That must be the most fearful. Like a distant roaring drum. It's always in the back of your mind. It's always announcing itself in an audible way, but it's there. The possibility of this arrogance, the malcontent. Life is not good enough. The ego of man. I asked her about it. Is the ego, according to you, the biggest obstacle between my humanity and God? And she said, yes, of course, that's it. This self-centeredness, this urge, I added, this urge to strive for, the urge for independence, the need for independence, to walk away from God. Pour forth the black bitter blood of endless time. I'm not totally clear, I must be honest, about the meaning of that. Circling benign thoughts, spiral with inane unending woe. At least I get this, that there is bitterness, that it's a life and death issue, that it's without ending, and everything that is benign is circled by it, circling benign thoughts. Or are these benign thoughts circling? Are they just the superficial layer around the malcontent, the ego of man? There's an experience of the finitude of man, a speck of sand amid an ocean. And then there is one of the most funny but also maybe meaningful little spelling errors that she makes from time to time. From my tinny being I pray. My association immediately was with the Tin Man of the famous musical and story, The Tin Man. From my tiny being I pray. So there you have the second element, the prayer. I pray. What does she pray for? What do I pray for? I pray for a river of gold for the light of the divine. All of these words have something to do with the need for recovery and the inability to establish that recovery on your own. This sense of incapability. I'm just like a speck of sand amid an ocean. So I'm underwater. I have a tinny being, not a golden being, a tinny, tin-like being. And it's tiny, of course, with reference to the endlessness of time. And then finally, I think that brings us the closest to the meaning of the painting, to mend the cracks of my humanity. When I read that, I took a look at the Adam figure here. Isn't there something like cracks here? I mean, this is the way, of course, that the three-dimensionality is expressed and some kind of shadow is suggested. Nevertheless, you might say that this is a cracked figure because it's, the way she did it suggests to me that it might be something like cracks. Now, this is my humanity that we're talking about. So there's nothing really good about it. And I don't believe that the figure in the painting, and I talked to her about that, the figure in the painting is not praying. Prayer means openness toward these rays of light. As she told me, the most comfortable, most natural way of prayer is on your knees, to bow down for the divinity. I told her that my favorite position in prayer is standing, like a servant in the court of the heavenly king, being ready for whatever mission he will give you. But in both cases, you are facing the divine. You're not turning your back to the divine. Now, I know that in some cases, prayer is done with a head bowed down, so that you're looking at the feet of God. But I think the theological idea that she and I share is the idea that we are actually children of God. So the child is standing there waiting his father's, the king's orders. He's part of the royalty. Or he is bowing down as a supplicant. And there is the difference. Prayer as a supplicant means alienation. Prayer standing means to be part of the divine household. That's where she and I maybe have different experiences or a different theological idea. That leads to a conversation. And that conversation is exactly what is needed to make this work efficient, efficacious in the world. It works something out. It engenders a conversation with the artist, with the painting, and with these difficult questions. Who am I? What is the meaning of my prayer? What is my relationship to the divine? Is it an open, familial relationship? Am I like a child and God is my father? Maybe also the king, so I'm part of his royal household? Or is it this submission because of guilt and despair, with this touch of arrogance that I rather not face the divine and turn my back to him? For me, it was very interesting to find out that these questions are not really, not finally decided or answered. But also for the painter, for Bianca, these questions linger on. When she told me about her intentions, the intentions behind the painting, it was also, I think, obvious to her that her intentions were not simply expressed in the painting. There was something in the painting that might be interpreted differently, maybe even contradict the original intent. Maybe humility and prayer was kind of a softening of the original painting as it was produced. The painting suggests despair. Humility and prayer says, if we're humble enough and we can pray, there is solace in that. There's maybe healing for this broken soul. questions upon questions upon questions. We enter into a dialogue with the painting, especially because there is this additional layer of interpretation in the poem. And I might add, that is one of the many reasons that I love this work so much. Thanks for listening. If you have your own comments about the work, please tell me. I'm not an expert in art, by no means. I'm not an expert in the philosophy of art, but I'm really happy that I can have this conversation with Bianca, and I thought it might be a good idea to tell you about it and to try to elicit some comment and response for all of this. Okay, thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time.